can we trust to tell us the truth? Once in another tumultuous era, as the Vietnam War, Watergate, the civil rights and women's liberation movements were challenging America to its core, my dad and I would watch Walter Cronkite, a man he trusted to tell us what was happening. Dad, a politically conservative, career military man, cared a lot about this country and was determined to make sure he was well informed. He listened to the radio every morning, read the paper every afternoon, and watched the news on TV every evening before sitting down to dinner, where at some point he would almost always launch a debate about what was happening in the world. He'd pound the table and say something like, "Don't those Vietnam War protesters know it's my country, right or wrong?" And I'd react with something like, "But Dad, don't they have a point? I mean, what are we doing in Vietnam?" And he'd puff up and get red in the face and respond with something like, "I can't believe I'm hearing those words out of the mouth of my own daughter." Our arguments could get so loud, my brothers and sisters would sometimes pick up their plates to eat somewhere else. Dad really liked to win these arguments, but even when he didn't, he'd respect my opinion. Sometimes he would even say, "Ann, I don't always agree with you, but I'd still vote for you for president." There were times, however, usually when Walter was off and someone else was substituting, when Dad would hear something on the evening news that would alarm him far more than the stories of the day. All it would take was one phrase, a changed tone of voice, a raised eyebrow, or even just a single word that struck Dad as opinionated, and he was offended. Suddenly, he was shaking his finger at the television set, shouting, "Stop telling me what to think! Just give me the facts!" And then he would look over at me and say, "See, Ann, he's disrespecting us, trying to tell us what to think as if we're stupid and can't make up our own minds." Boy, if my dad could see what counts for some of TV journalism today. He would want to be right up here with me, standing right next to me, suggesting an idea that might be worth spreading. Journalism is only trustworthy when it dependably offers accurate, verifiable facts, not bias and speculation, and not for ratings, circulation, or clicks. Or for any financial or political motivation, but with one motive and one motive only: to reveal the truth for the greater public good. The bridge to trust is truth, and it's time to make things right. What do we define as truth? Well, lately I've wondered if we've all gotten a little confused about what truth is and what it isn't. People ask, whose truth? Uncertain if objective, absolute truth even exists, thinking, as some philosophers have argued, that as it requires human judgment, truth is ultimately subjective. As others see it, reporters can't be fair and unbiased because, being human, of course they have opinions, and so should at least tell us what those opinions are. Other people who've noticed objective facts now seem less influential than emotion and personal beliefs in shaping public opinion have gone so far as to say we live in a post-truth era. To all this, my dad would say, balderdash. He was a Navy man who didn't like to swear, go figure. I, however, don't seem to have that problem. So maybe I should just call it what it is. FUBAR, fucked up beyond all recognition. I appreciate philosophers, but not being one, I can't settle the is truth subjective or objective debate. Though it does seem to be an objective, verifiable fact that I'm standing on this stage. And that I'm a little nervous, worried that I may have overdressed, and I'm wishing that I wore more comfortable shoes. There is actually compelling evidence that humans can be fair and impartial, not just from the ancient biblical story of Solomon, but from the known science, which tells us that fairness, along with empathy, are fundamental human traits, deeply rooted in our genetics. If it wasn't for these traits, we might not even be able to live amongst each other. And as a reporter, I know you can get in so deep listening to and documenting all sides of a story, searching for the truth, that you don't even know what your own opinion is. I know because I've done it. And because we as a species cannot long endure without objective facts, unelaborated and unvarnished, it can be argued they still and will always matter. We need truth, perhaps especially from journalism, which, when practiced well, can help us see each other and ourselves more honestly, tell us what we need to know to be smarter citizens, show us how to live healthier and more connected lives, and even warn us when we need to keep ourselves and our loved ones safe from danger. Post-truth? Really? We do seem to be experiencing a loss of credibility, a demise in the face of a rising tide of lies, in our ability to trust what we're told are objective facts are either objective or facts. Where does the information that's sowing this distrust and confusion come from? And what is it doing to us and the quality of our relationships with each other? Instead of a Walter Cronkite today, i.e. someone who a significant number of people trust, we are exposed to an overwhelming number of sources of information on multiple platforms, working around the clock to get our attention. Some motivated to purposely manipulate us with lies and propaganda. Some inept, shelling out incomplete, misleading, or poorly sourced information. And some doing exemplary reporting, but still doubted almost as much for any mistakes or perceived bias. The net impact of all of this is a chaotic overload of competing, conflicting, and confusing information. And while our brains are truly excellent at collecting data, we're not always so great at remembering where we got it. So what we learn from a trusted source can easily get jumbled up in our brains with what we read on a website, saw in a tweet, or a video posted on Facebook, or heard from a pundit speculating on cable television. If you ever saw the David Bowie movie, The Man Who Fell to Earth, I sometimes feel we're all in that scene in which he's watching a huge wall of TV monitors, each one tuned to a different channel. And suddenly he can't take it anymore and he starts yelling, "Get out of my mind, all of you!" Bet you didn't expect a David Bowie reference today. Perhaps never before have so many consumed so much news and yet have been so woefully misinformed. When, in this swirling chaos, can we be certain the information we need or want to know is accurate? The internet is an abyss as well as a wonderland. It mirrors the darkest dark in us and the brightest light of humanity and all there is in between. And because of it, no matter what comes next in journalism, there now seems no doubt that you and me and every one of us must become a better editor. So here, from one journalist playbook, are some tried and true strategies that might up your game. Focus on defense and develop a skill for listening to both sides of a story, even if it pains you. Realize virtually every source wants a story told as he or she sees it. That means even seemingly good, honest people can tell you just the facts that support their point of view, sometimes leaving out key details. They might even distort the facts, purposely misdirect you, or even out and out lie. Ask yourself, what is the motivating force for this source to tell the story? And could that motivation be influencing the story that you're getting? Then ask, is this source in a position, having been an eyewitness or having some expertise, to even know what is true? Or is he or she wasting your time with speculation? And because even eyewitnesses and experts can get it wrong, you have to seek out sources from other points of view and then critically examine their motivations and credibility as well. Rarely is the truth one-sided. It tends to be nuanced. And it's not always fair. But you may never find it unless you search fairly with a mind that is truly open. And then even if you think you have a balanced view of a story, you have to re-examine the facts and motivations and reputations of your sources one more time to make sure you weren't played or manipulated. And if your sources are anonymous, you better check and double check again. It is exhausting. But after this Sherlock Holmesing, you usually get the facts that people need to know to make up their own minds. This is Journalism 101, how we're trained in journalism schools to work in defense of truth. Why are even long-trusted news organizations that know how to gather the facts vulnerable to attacks on their credibility? Journalism tends to be vulnerable because of the enormous power of credible information. When we believe the same story, we can find a common purpose and work together. This is what has made humans an unstoppable force throughout our history. The historian Yuval Harari suggests this is why we are the only human species to survive when once there were at least 6. And why we have risen from the middle of the animal kingdom, once huddled around fires in fear of being eaten, to now the top, having the power to decide what species live or die and how we ourselves will evolve from here. This power to move people is why everyone wants to control the narrative, why truth is fought over and is the victim, usually the first victim, especially in war. It's why journalists, as messengers of truth, are physically attacked in some parts of the world and even killed. At the same time, unfortunately, journalism is not like mathematics, in which 2 + 2 is always 4. Journalism is by humans, about humans, and for humans, and so is inherently as fallible as humans and as vulnerable to criticism. Add to that the job is to ask prying questions, to push past the norms of good manners for honest answers, and then to race to report stories that can be controversial, embarrassing, or infuriating. If you want to be popular, don't be a journalist. Of course, it doesn't help journalism's credibility when it's under constant attack by political leaders in the United States and around the world. It doesn't help that emerging technologies have eliminated or diminished hundreds of local newspapers around the country and have failed so far to replace them with anything close to the same quality and range of credible reporting. But perhaps what is making journalism most vulnerable is that in this industry shift, some media executives struggling to keep making money for their corporate owners are pressuring journalists to make choices that weaken their credibility. The pressure for profits is one reason we have witnessed the stunning growth of openly biased news coverage, especially on cable television, where not everyone who is telling us the news is actually a journalist. Some are advocates with political agendas, some are activists, some are former political operatives, and some are what were once called opinionators, people whose profession is to give their opinions and theories. So now I'm the one yelling at the television set. Just give me the facts. Stop trying to tell us what to think. Opinion, thoughtful and supported with facts, has an important place in journalism, but it is not news. Thus, allowing viewers to think it's news, to fail to differentiate it, is fundamentally dishonest. News is not left or right. It's based on facts that are either right or wrong. And for the record, ranting from any point of view is not journalism. Besides, it has serious side effects. It makes you look a little nuts. In the quest for profits, corporate owners are punching holes through the long-standing wall protecting journalists from corporate meddling. In some companies, the wall is crumbling. I have heard a request from corporate executives to kill a news story. I have seen a media company's advertising side try to get products placed in a news broadcast. In some companies, the wall appears to be collapsing. Recently, the nation's largest broadcaster, Sinclair Broadcasting Group, which owns and operates more than 190 stations, engaged in corporate manipulation when it required dozens of anchors to read a script the company had provided. The push for profits is also pressuring journalists to muddy their judgment with worries about reaching clicks, ratings, and circulation goals. This can affect the decisions they make about what stories to cover, what interviews to do, and how headlines and teases should be written. The public is not stupid. It can sense these motives in the work and the hype. It knows the truth is in trouble. How do we make things right and defend our access to accurate, verifiable reporting, which, according to our nation's founding fathers, our democracy needs to survive? We need a renaissance in journalism. And it is actually possible that it is already beginning. We can see some of our nation's newspapers and magazines, in spite of everything, leading a rebirth, doubling down on serious, competitive, and groundbreaking shoe leather journalism, working to tell all the nuances of the stories they're covering, including both domestic and foreign. Our citizens are awakening to the reasons journalism is vital in a democracy. They're reminded by the movies Spotlight and The Post, and they're increasingly demanding and supporting quality work. And in some cases, they are even donating to the Committee to Protect Journalists. And journalists can be seen increasingly standing up to corporate pressures, including at the Denver Post and at Sinclair TV stations. They're also pushing across platforms to do smarter and more impactful reporting and balanced stories. And in some newsrooms, editors are reviving investigative reporting. Credibility lost is never fully regained. But what survives can be protected, and new bridges can be built by the journalists still to come. For that to happen, for news organizations to better endure attacks on their credibility, journalists must be able to work with one motive, the public good. Corporate owners and executives must know how to stay in their lane and out of influencing what and how stories are covered. Investors and advertisers will need to stop pressuring journalists to be their pot of gold and do what's right for this country, fund excellence, and get out of the way. Editors and executive producers will have to fight harder against the blurring between opinion and news and tell all the stories we need to know, not just the ones or the one that might increase ratings and clicks. Technologists should realize they are not journalists. They are platform creators and owners and should hire solid reporters and then leave them alone and make those reporters great forces for good. And news consumers, if you want the facts, subscribe. Read newspapers. And perhaps ask why would journalism that's any good be free? Why do any one of us routinely put up with baseless opinion, speculation, and propaganda? And why do we waste so much time on the Kardashians? Too much sugar just makes you fat. Journalists, keep going and stay humble. We may know a little about a lot, but few of us know enough about anything to have an opinion that matters. So we dig for the facts that do matter from all sides and then fight like hell to tell them. And potential future journalists, your country needs you. Journalism is war, a fight every day for truth. And it takes more than being curious and knowing how to write or blog or shoot a video or ask questions. It takes courage. And most of all, it takes integrity. Because journalism is only as good as the people who practice it and their willingness to stand up and fight for the stories that mean something. You will make mistakes. We all do. But with practice and instincts you may not know you have, you will learn to make less of them. You will face a lack of resources. You will be denied access. People will refuse to give you interviews. Editors and executive producers will give you impossible deadlines and not enough time or space to tell your stories. This is emotionally hard and sometimes around-the-clock work. It might cause people to hate you. It might put you in danger or expose you to trauma that might give you PTSD. This I know from experience. But after nearly 40 years at this, I still stand here before you and can honestly say with all my heart, journalism is a noble calling, a way to serve people and respond like an EMT or an emergency room doctor in a crisis with information they may need. If you work for the people and not for those who pay your checks, you will make the right choices about who to interview, what to ask, and how to tell your stories. And this will bring your news organizations value that will make even your bosses happy. Be incorruptible. Do it with a pure motive, earnestly, without bias and expectations. Do it even though you may never know the impact of your stories. Do it even if you know you will be criticized. But get it right, which you will find is far more important than getting it first. Attribute. Attribute whenever possible. Check, and then double check the facts. Ruthlessly edit out any word or phrase or tone in your work that could get in the way of people making up their own minds. This is how we build trust, by working to be worthy of it. It is time to lift truth off its knees, prize it, cherish it, defend it, and watch it rise along with all of us. Thank you.